Rich Benoit is a senior consultant with Steelcase, and he has over 10 years of experience and insights to help organizations create highly effective cultures and business strategies. So Rich is one of the thought leaders from Steelcase, and we are very pleased to have him here today. And he is really going to share what the future of the workplace might look like. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Rich.
Well, thank you. This will not be nearly as exciting and mesmerizing as the wine explanation, because I found it, I'm not a big wine drinker, but it was incredibly educational. So personally, I'm really glad that I was able to listen in and okay, I think I need to buy a bottle of this stuff on the way home.
So Rich, we'll send one your way.
Okay. Since I'm actually in the Steelcase office and they kind of frown upon drinking in the office, although it is after 5, it just is after 5. So I probably am still, I would be legal, but I don't think I want to go there. So thanks for having me on, and Lori and the rest of you. So, our group has been really talking to lots of companies around the country and even around the world, trying to, we're all learning at the same time. So, one of the questions we've gotten asked is, well, who's brought everybody back to the office, and what does it look like? And can you show us some case studies? And we're like, no. We can tell you the one country that probably has brought the most people back to the office is China. And the contact tracing that is done there is so beyond anything that would ever be considered acceptable in the States, makes it just not even, it's not practical, with just the tracing that they're doing. So, we're anticipating probably, people thinking about what in terms of their planning, it is probably going to be next year. But what we are finding is lots of companies are starting to think, well, all the rules are now broken. And so things that they maybe would not have tried before, it's like, well, you know what? We send everybody home to work it's been 6 months. It's probably going to be another 3 to 4 months for a lot of other workers. It's like, well, we kind of got nothing to lose at this point. So I don't know, do you have the slides to go forward, or do I need to? Okay. So part of our research that I thought would be worth sharing is getting a perspective from the employees about what they think about returning to the workplace will be like. And this is not just a survey. So it's, what lots of companies have been doing checking in with their, employees, like, how do you feel? And are you productive? And, what do you miss? And those sorts of things. And we're getting kind of topical things. And it's a little misleading, because if you're working from home right now and your company is struggling with the, economic downturn, and you're concerned about, losing your job, the last thing you're going to admit is, I'm really not getting my work done, and I'm afraid I'm going to, and you can lose me. So there's enough fear factor that's keeping people at least connected. So how we did this is things like video interviews, and one of the other techniques we did was this photo journaling, where we gave people an app and we asked them about what's the best part of working from home, or what's the most distracting. We actually take photos and create a little story around what it's like to work from home, and the empathy. And we actually did it a big part for some of our own employees across the world, and the empathy our leaders had for people working from home, just amazing when they saw people were working at a if you think about a tablet chair you'd have in a second grade classroom, in a closet, because they lived in with their extended family, and it was the only place they could get any kind of privacy. So it's like, wow, the work from home experience really, isn't all that great for everyone. So if you go to the next slide, what we were able to do was look at these archetypes, and I'll kind of go through these, and then most likely you're going to see yourself in one of these. And it gives, again, predominant behaviors. But the first one we talk about is this isolated Zoomer. So this is somebody who probably lives alone. They get up in the morning and instead of driving to work, they go sit down at their kitchen table and they realize it's 2 o'clock and they haven't left to even have some lunch. And then all of a sudden they realize it's dark outside and they've lost their routine. So they just simply work all day long because there's nothing there. There's nobody around. They don't have the commute into the office or back home. So while they're kind of productive, their work-life balance has really gone to hell and they're completely burnt out because they don't have enough discipline to separate themselves. The autonomy seeker, we kind of joke with some of the researchers about these primarily being introverts who love working from home because there's nobody next to them. They don't have to listen to the little chit chat of like, ooh, how was your date last night? Or somebody walking by their desk, got 5 minutes, I just got a quick question. So they have complete control over their day. They get up in the morning, they get some work done, they take the dog for a walk at 10:30, at 12:15, they make themselves some lunch. It's like, oh yeah, I got to call into that 1 o'clock meeting, but when I'm done, I'll get this other stuff done. So they love the isolation. The frustrated creative networker. So these are the people that are probably more on the around the innovative side, the more extroverted, social kind of person that thrives on sharing every idea they have with them to get your opinion. Or they walk around to see what everybody else is doing, and they're kind of like nosing around to see like, hey, well, what's up with this project? And so their whole sense of performance is sharing, or they want to ask a question and they're so used to turning to the person next to them like, hey, I need to show you something. And now it's like, I have to schedule a Teams call and I have to like find out if they're available, and they're not really available until tomorrow. And like, okay, so like I feel so dejected. We have the overworked caretaker. I have 14 kids and we're homeschooling and my spouse really isn't helping. And then, okay, his parents came to live with us because they couldn't, and so I'm getting my work done, but I have to be up till 2 in the morning to be able to get my stuff done because I don't have all this time. And so, yeah, I feel like crap all the time and, to trying to keep up. And the last one, this relief self-preservationist, these are people who don't necessarily feel appreciated at work. And one of the analogies I put with this is a number of years ago, we did a ton of research on engagement in the office. And we found about a third of employees were typically highly engaged and they're super active. You get about a third of employees that, just are biding their time and like looking for another job and completely disengaged. And then we have about a third of people that do just enough work to not get fired. So they show up for the meetings, they're in the background. So yep, they log in, they don't put their video cameras on. If you ask them to get something done, like it shows up in the email. So they're doing enough they're present enough that like, oh yeah, they're still around, but they're not necessarily like going going anymore. So I already seeing in the chat, everybody's kind of identifying, one of these behaviors. So, these aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. You'll find, there's obviously a little bit of, rollover, but yeah, we got the overworked caretaker, we've got the, and I'm sure some of you can, relate to the autonomy seeker being there, or, especially any of you that are trying to, do any kind of design work, when you're sitting there by yourself, when you used to, hey, can you look at this with me? So the reason for kind of looking at this is kind of categorizing people, because the sentiments people have about coming back to the office are not universal. We know people just can't wait to come back in because they want to get away from the kids. People that really feel like, hey, you know what, if I can work from home and never come to the office, I'm really good with that. And, so we've got those extremes, but we also would expect that, we'll start to see a lot of hybrid. And so, yep, we got some creative networkers and like, yeah, again, it's going to be all over. And so part of what, we're kind of introducing a concept like this is just to help organizations start to be more strategic around bringing people back. This isn't an all or nothing. And we're certainly hearing that most companies are going to accept the fact that there will be some work from home in the future, but it isn't just simply some percentage will never come in and some percentage will always be in. It's like, well, how do you figure this out? So if you go to the next slide, the expectations from workers have really changed. And so when we think about these archetypes, getting some of these behaviors, their expectations around coming to the office are fairly consistent. So this idea of authentic relationships, right now, managers are reaching out to their employees in ways they probably never did before. So if you think about your role with your manager, or if you manage people, how much more intimate your conversations have when you're calling in from each other's kitchens, not sitting in a conference room. So you've let people in. And so everybody's been able to see a more personal side of people. So the expectation, obviously coming back to the office, is that's going to continue. That personal relationship they're gonna like, well, of course, like I've seen you in your pajamas, and I've seen your kids running around, so of course I'm gonna ask how the kids are. Go to the next one. It's this idea of responsible autonomy. Prior to the pandemic, less than 15% of the U.S. sort of white collar workforce was able to work remotely, and it was more seen as a perk. If you've been with the company for 37 years and you've never missed a day at work, so I guess we can trust you. And so trust was probably one of the biggest cultural challenges that companies had with letting people work remotely. This idea like, well, if I can't see you, how do I know you're working? And now, of course, now they figured out how to do that. Well, employees have proven to their companies that they can work from remotely and be productive, even if they're not being observed and micromanaged. So when they come back to the office, they're going to expect that same level of autonomy and flexibility. If I can work at home for full time through a pandemic, why do I have to show up 5 days a week in the future? It's definitely not about the performance. So that obviously people are going to sort of assume some level of flexibility. Okay, the next one is this organizational transparency. So one of the things we've seen is, communication from leadership throughout the organizations has never been like this before. When you have CEOs streaming a little video chat from, their home office, just checking in with everybody, and this is what they're going through. So this authentic, transparent communication, you're asking employees, how you doing? And you're listening. And so, these employees are going to expect when they come back to the office that their voices to be heard. Well, you asked me before what I was thinking. Well, why aren't you asking me now? And so, that hierarchy that we had with everybody working off a screen in their pajamas, all of that hierarchy kind of like dissolving and is going to continue to kind of go away, because the video screen is one of the most sort of democratizing tools everybody has. There is no head of the table when you're all sitting in the video camera. Everybody's sort of like in their little box around the screen. So it's an incredible equalizer. So you go to the next one, please. Digital dexterity. Again, part of reaching out to everybody is digital transformation has accelerated in ways we never anticipated. Companies figured it would take 2, 3, 4 years to really adopt Teams. And as a consultant working with different kinds of companies, I would always challenge them about video conferencing and the value of it, working with a distributed team. And it's like, no, we have the conference. Everybody's got that big conference phone in the room. It's like, that's dead. No one is going to go back to the office and accept that conference phone has any sense of technology. So, like, don't even bother. If all I can do is dial in, I'm not going to bother. And so people have figured out how to upload files through a VPN to a SharePoint file. Even companies I work with that had big call centers, and you'd ask call center employees, could you work anywhere but your desk? And it's like, oh my God, no. I have to have my 2 screens, and I need to have all of my pinup stuff around me, and I need to have my binders and all my reference material. Like, there's no way I could ever function without my workstation with all my stuff. And oh my goodness, they figured it out in a matter of weeks. So that expectation of what they were able to accomplish at home is going to certainly translate to what they anticipate seeing coming back to the office. Next one. Social connections. The number one reason people want to come back to the office is because who is there? I want to catch up with my friends. I want to have a meaningful conversation with my boss. I want to sit as my team to brainstorm. I want to have these sidebar conversations, and I want to be able to have the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting with the people who are there. So the nature of the future of the office is going to need to embrace all of this water cooler chat that, some companies sort of acknowledge, yeah, that's kind of important, and we kind of let it go, because if we're going to encourage people to come in, well, now they're realizing that's the biggest thing that's missed, because that's what builds trust. And one of the interesting we're starting to see over the last, several months is the people you work with all the time, you've built these incredible relationships because you see them all the time, and you see them in their living rooms, and you work on things together in ways that are a little challenging. Now what happens is the people you don't see all the time become even further removed. So our extended networks are already disintegrating. And so while we're thinking like, no, this is great, the people I work with all the time are right here when I need them. But what about all those other people that you really need that you don't work with all the time? And that becomes, that will become really disruptive. So the need to create this sense of community for people to connect, all throughout the organization. Again, this hierarchy's kind of gone away. I actually this morning, and Tracy was there when Jim Keene, our CEO, was really excited that we were all in the office, and he made a comment about, yeah, if I wanted to have coffee with Rich, and like, okay, I would have never expected that before. So anyway, the next one. Sensible work choices. People are going to be much more conscientious about the decisions that they make about coming to the office and what they do. Do I really need to drive in today? Or, do I save the gas and save the wear and tear and the dry cleaning? Or, am I going to go to a third place because I need to connect with 3 of my coworkers, and we all live on this side of town. So instead of coming into the main office, maybe we're going to go to a satellite, or we're going to go meet at Starbucks to get our work done. And so we think that people are going to really have this desire to really, again, going back to this idea of autonomy, to make really wise choices, and they're going to be much more thoughtful about those choices. And so on the next slide, some of these things sort of translate into what we expect to see from these personalities. And we talk about grouping people into these personas and how they're going to be able to work. And so, and obviously these will start to translate into how we think space is going to evolve a little bit. But this focus outside the office, if I'm going to be working from home extensively, what is that experience like? And as an employer, what is my responsibility to create a great work experience? Blending work into home. How do we create this seamless transition from working from home and working in the office so that it doesn't really matter because I'm back and forth all the time? Or how do I harness social energy and drive network building and mentoring and knowledge sharing throughout the enterprise so it becomes a big thing? Generating in person, new ideas come from both individuals and teamwork. So this need to be able to focus and work without distraction is both, people coming into the office want that ability to hide away, as well as teams want to be able to hide away and not be distracted. And how do you balance that? And that last one, ignite with structure. And this is about creating protocols and planful situations so that people can really get the best out of the space. So, Nestor, you've got a question?
I'm curious with the work that you've been doing with this work and kind of the polling and the stuff that you've been doing. Is there any discussion? We kind of switched in our office from, oh, I need my second monitor to, God, I wish I took my chair home. Has there been any discussion with how do you support your employees from a work from home situation with regard to things like furniture and workstations and things like that? Is there any general trends that employers are talking about when it comes to that kind of support level?
The general trend is there's a conversation. I don't know that we've seen anything definitive in terms of, you have companies that are, I think Google has provided $1,000 to every employee to buy whatever they want. It could be a stand-up desk. It could be a new chair. We are certainly seeing lots of companies, just because of the companies that we have that we do business with, that are setting up websites, and I'm sure NBS has done some of these as well, where they made it really easy for companies to purchase furnishings for their employees, or let the employee go directly into the Steelcase store. The philosophy is all over the map. There are some companies that feel responsible. And for companies that had teleworkers in the past, where these are people who really did work full-time from home, they never came in the office, they would always provide, or typically provide, office furniture for those teleworkers. Well, now we have this hybrid where they're not really teleworkers, they're just not in the office. But there's a couple of reasons companies are starting to do it. One is liability. If somebody gets injured or has an ergonomic issue working from home, they obviously feel some sense of responsibility to support the ergonomic issues. There are others that just want their employees to have a great experience working from home, and there are some companies that have thought, what, we let people work from home before it was a perk. If they want to work from home, they're on their own. If they want a good chair and 2 monitors, they can come into the office. So it's kind of, it's an interesting conversation, and every company is having that conversation. They're landing all over the place. So, hopefully I answered your question. And like Lori said, they can dig into that a lot more, use some of those options. So if you go to the next slide, please. What we're now starting to envision is, what do these environments start to look like? And, it's not, yes, flexibility is one thing. Does everything go on wheels? Well, maybe that's a little extreme, but the need for companies to be far more resilient is obviously a huge part of the strategy moving forward, because what we know is that things are going to continue to change. And so being prepared to change is probably the kind of like the biggest disruptor. And the challenge that we typically see between, again, this fixed to fluid environments is who controls the change. If you have to call facilities all the time to make changes, that's not really terribly flexible. But are we going to allow people to make changes within their, sort of the neighborhood, so to speak, so that they can adapt that immediate environment to support the kind of work that they're doing. So if they really want to come together as a team, they can do that. If they want to work individually, they can create some separation. On the next slide, we talked a little bit more about merging the physical and the digital. So, one of the things to anticipate is the likelihood that you'll have meetings where everyone is present is not really very big. It wasn't before the pandemic. You would always walk in and somebody's always calling in. And again, the expectation is going to be somebody's not calling in. They're going to be, working through Teams or Skype or Zoom or whatever it is. And so the interface that people have to understand how to connect with other people, things like wayfinding are obviously going to be more important, because if I come in, I kind of want to know where, what's available for me in terms of seating. So we think that the environment is going to get a whole lot more smarter to be able to accommodate a much more proficient audience. Right now, people didn't know how to use the technology. Well, they will when they come back. I think there's one more slide around choice and control. And again, choice and control goes well beyond, obviously within their environment, and being more thoughtful about, do I come in? So choice and control is probably going to, be, remote or third places to work. But I'm actually going to think about, well, what do I need to do? And so the range of these spaces is going to keep growing, but also we talk about choice. We need to give people control, and that's probably one of the things that probably is still going to take a little bit of work, from the organization standpoint, to empower people to use all of these. So, working from home, nobody tells me that I can't sit there or I shouldn't sit there. I need to be visible. When I come into the office, I'm going to sort of assume I have that same level of flexibility. So it's not about being visible to my boss, it's about being present to my coworkers. So I'm going to start to think more holistically about what that experience is. And obviously the amenities throughout the environment are just going to keep accelerating. So I think that was the last slide, I believe. Yeah. So again, a quick little run through, because I know the wine is probably pretty tasty at this point. And I guess, Alicia, you've got a question.
Yes, I'm curious as to what has actually. Oh, sorry. What has actually changed at Steelcase? I mean, is this changed like some products that were maybe further out in the spectrum, or years that now you're trying to bring to market faster? What has been your own changes with this?
Yes, although I can't tell you, partly because I really don't know, other than it has accelerated a number of product development efforts that were, things like, maybe we'll get to this, but it absolutely has reprioritized our product development efforts. Is particularly in terms of looking at privacy solutions. Because I'm sitting in the office right now, and it's a little embarrassing because we have these big cardboard screens around all the desks to make it safe for people. And what I found fascinating was people cut out little windows and put plexiglass in the cardboard so they can see their neighbors. So it's real interesting. Again, part of my job is to watch how people acclimate to the space, and it's like, okay, clearly that's not the right answer. So we've encouraged people to come back into the office, but we have a ton of protocols. Like, in order for me to do this without a mask on, I can't sit in one of our enclaves because the enclaves don't have enough air filtration. So they tend to build up, from one person sitting there. So I'd have to wear a mask. So I had to find the right place to sit. So, watching, people are starting to utilize spaces. We're obviously limited in how many people can fit into a conference room. And, but so I think that, a lot of things that we're working in the future is things like, how do you create better social spaces that still are safe and, and interesting, knowing that we're really planning for a post-pandemic. We're not, this idea of having the screens and wearing the mask is eventually going to go away, but we still need to be certain that we're creating. And so some of you may be aware, we're actually working with a lab at MIT to really thoroughly evaluate virus transmission, and not just virus transmissions, but what is the role of furniture in creating a safe environment. So, we're got a lot of people and spending a fair amount of resources to really better understand Even things like airflow. What happens when we talked about this for years with temperature control and airflow and air quality. Well, what happens when your panel heights go to the ceiling? How does it impact airflow? So there's a number of things that we're working on that are clearly influenced by creating safer environments, more collegiate environments, and quieter environments.
Looks like we have a question from Nestor, who has been waiting patiently.
Oh, sorry. I just saw that.
In your experience right now, has much of industry that you've worked with talked about as they return, and you sort of briefly touched on it, but the digital solutions for what spaces are open, what is Steelcase's take on how does that integrate with the furniture solution, and how does that get automated?
So yeah, we actually have a whole platform, our smart and connected platform, which is using sensor technology that's connected into map wayfinding systems. So for example, we can put sensors on all the desks and in the conference rooms that acknowledge that a space is occupied, and that can be seen on a screen or on your phone. So what some companies are doing, I mean, we don't have a reservation system, but some companies are doing that because they're limiting the number of people in, and they want to, people want to know what seat's going to be available. So now I can come in and I can look and see what seat's open. So I can go ahead and book it and be able to know that I've got that, that seat for the day. It also gives us recording data to know how many seats are occupied. The same thing with conference rooms. That if one of the systems we used before was, is the room occupied or is it available, which it's actually connected to a signage system. So, I'm sure, there are people at NBS that are, far better versed at all of the ins and outs of this. And I think that one of your last ones was you had Zach from our Smart and Connected team on one of those. So they can give you a whole lot more detail about that. But we are seeing more companies start to leverage technology in terms of things like wayfinding, density management, and then certainly when we start to look at managing the spaces in the future, because we will probably start to see more unassigned spaces. And one of the ways the analogy I put is the office becoming the community center. So if you think about your local community center, your local club, everybody goes there for a different reason. I might go to take a class. I might take my kids to the daycare. I might use the gym or the pool. I might go to potluck. I might go to a card game. There might be a number of reasons I go there. And I go there with all the people that I know from my community, and we all access all those amenities, but none of us own any of them. And so, it's one way of thinking about the workplace of the future being that destination and it's very purposeful. I'm going there because of who's there and the amenities there to get me, to be able to do that. And so being able to measure the success of those amenities so that I can be a little bit more nimble in making sure my spaces are really providing the right kind of services to the what people are expecting.
So Rich, we had a question in the chat, which I think you did a nice job of answering, but it was around amenities to bring people back in. And I think your reference to the community center is a great one. So I just wanted to make sure that we fully answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that right now everything's on, literally everything's on the table. Humana, which is based in Louisville, Kentucky, has this amazing experiment they did with pop-up offices, and they went to a local park and set up tents and heaters and Wi-Fi and like high-end restrooms and food trucks, and let people come out and they could book a seat, and they had 100% reservations the first week, and you can book a seat for half a day so they could get more people, and teams could come in and book a tent, and it served about 150 people, and over the last, I think it's been out there for 4 or 5 weeks now, they have had a waiting list every day. So it just shows that how it's a very interesting experiment, and how people do want to come and be together, and they're not constrained by the paradigm of what the office was. So it's like not necessarily that, you know, if you think about those amenities, it's like, wow, this was like taking it to a whole new level in creating that idea of creating a destination that kind of supports like kind of what they're doing.
I think that's great. And I know, Rich, you touched on this briefly, but just could you expand a little bit more on the partnership with MIT and really like where we see that going in the future from a Steelcase perspective?
It's about having data more than anything else. So they're evaluating, you know, furniture configurations, things like airflow, I think microbials. I mean, it's a fairly comprehensive engagement with them to really understand, you know, what does, even questions like, well, how long do germs live on fabric? And so there, you know, there's things around that because it's like we talk about cleaning, and and it isn't necessarily. I mean, obviously, COVID was the catalyst to do this, but it's well beyond any. You know, it's looking at viruses and bacteria and any kind of other pathogen, so that we have a better understanding that's data driven around how do we create, you know, these safer environments. You know, there's lots of anecdotal stories about, and I think that, you know, we look at things like airflow, you know, it actually has been able to be measured, and, you know, companies are taking incredible precautions now about changing their filters and introducing more outdoor air. And as one facility manager said, well, yeah, but that's going to cost more money. And the other one says, like, get over it. This whole COVID thing, like, you're just going to start spending more money, get over it. And you're just going to have to budget for it, because the idea that, well, we're just recirculating indoor air. And this was somebody who brought up, like, well, since we don't have many people in the building, we just shut off the air conditioning. And there was like this gasp from the rest of the audience, like, no, like, you can't do that. So, I think the more that we have real data around transmission is, again, whether it's surface coatings or it's treatments or it's what kind of barriers really do make a difference, they will be substantiated, not just like, because even the idea of putting screens up, the CDC, like, yeah, they talked about barriers between people, but what they were thinking is like, it's the barrier, like when you go to buy tickets at the theater and you go up to the window or you've got that that glass partition and you kind of slide things into the drawer. It's about, that level of protection. When we think about adding partitions and glass, plexiglass barriers in the office, well, what goes above it? So they never really sanctioned any of that. It was always, it was pretty anecdotal, like, well, if it's over eye level. And we had all kinds of, companies weighing in where their health and safety people felt 6 feet was mandatory. And others said, no, it's got to be 84 inches. And others said, well, no, as long as it's above nose level, we're good. And, do you have a mask on or not? So we want to kind of get rid of that and be able to say, that we have actually tested this and be able to report those findings.
For sure. Thank you for that. We just wanted to say thank you again, Rich.
No, my pleasure.
You bring such a great perspective, and again, I love everything from the archetypes to just everything that we need to be thinking about right now. We really appreciate you bringing your expertise.
Sure, and I'm looking forward to my bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, Tracy?
Home address, right? Because it's not going to the office.
Rich, there was some requests for your slides, and we're hoping that maybe you could share a little condensed version that we could pass along.
Yeah, I can send some. I can send that over.
Okay, awesome.
And Lori, to complement to expand on what Rich was talking about with airflow, maybe we should also send out some information in regards to our CCS division and what they have. With this new filter now that can be purchased, it can be a standalone filter that can cover about 1,500 square foot, approximately, where it constantly takes in the air, and it's on a freestanding stand. But what comes out of it helps kill any virus that's in the air. And that actually can be put into building HVAC systems. So I think we need to, get that kind of marketing information out to people too.
For sure. So that's actually a good segue to say that's really where we started with all of this. And when we started, we were not representing this product, but this is a great product. We'd love to share a little bit more with everybody on the call, but this is a great little filtering system that either can be attached to the wall or put into your HVAC system. And it's great because it's an addition to decontamination services, the fogging and the cover shield as well. So we have covered kind of the gamut of what people are experiencing in that time horizon of now with our design and our decontamination sessions, in the near with our return to space, and now in the far, kind of closing out our Wind Down Wednesdays with Rich Benoit.